All right. Welcome, everybody. Wow, we got a room full. Um, Thank you for attending the Origins of Property Mapping and Property Mapping Standards in North Carolina um, for the NCAUG virtual conference. Today's speaker, or this session's speaker, is going to be Roscoe Reeve. He is a retired lands and GIS director for Orange County. He is a co-founder and past president of the NCPMA. He designed and programmed the computerized Orange County land record system that included PIN land title document index and integrated land data from all land offices and geodatabases. He is a previous high school teacher and has taught at NCSU. And Roscoe, you are free to go.
Hi, everybody. Welcome, mappers and GIS professionals. I am really happy that you came after a lunch to a conference presentation. I always enjoyed 1 o'clock presentations after lunch, and so I appreciate you being here at this time. I want to take you back to our roots. Those of you who know me haven't seen this beard, and I just don't want you to be alarmed. I want you to know that it's really just I'm going to do an audition for the next Star Wars movie, which is Luke Skywalker, The Rise of the Jedi Geezer. Indeed, I'm not only retired, I'm incarcerated in a retirement community in Chapel Hill. And in a couple of weeks, I will be 81 years old. But if you've looked around sometimes on the dialogue about land records, you've seen me involve myself or give an opinion because I still keep track of you all. And I keep track of GIS and I keep track of land records. So I want to take you back to the origin of property mapping because a lot of the issues there are a lot of the issues now. A lot of the issues then are a lot of the issues now. I was very impressed with the presentation by Jay yesterday about ARC and its potential and the things that it can do with mapping and data. And I was very interested this morning in that discussion about combinations. We fought that out here in what you see in the early 80s, where property mapping was done by about 6 counties. And it was the result of a sales job by vendors to the quote tax offices about having maps for their property that their assessors could use and that they could share with citizens. So I take you back to the years of the early 80s with the Mylar map that had property on it and the paper map that was used for updates and for making copies to citizens. Remember the flatbed printer? Remember the data terminal? That's how we began with our experience of property mapping, where we wanted to get the records, the title records, the ownership records into the maps. The maps at that time had no accuracy in terms of there being a base, and they did not have the state plane coordinate system on them, nothing about NAT. They were done by vendors to look good. They had large scale for the towns and small scale for out in the countryside. Perhaps you've seen these maps. What happened? What happened was that the private sector complained to the federal government that it was too expensive to transact real property. And they being lenders or guarantors wanted the local governments to modernize. And so they got HUD to sponsor first participation in a conferences of governments and experts in mapping, conferences that became known as the MOLDS conferences. And like the current pandemic, MOLDS was a foreign invasion that slowly spread across the country. That is, it was led and begun by Canada, whose province governments were way ahead of almost any local government in the United States when it came to mapping. Their mapping program by the late 70s already was led by engineers and surveyors, and it governed the guarantee and the exact representation of real property in Canada. So they had a lot to show Americans who participated in this conference, these conferences. And lo and behold, the conferences were attended by our Orange Register of Deeds, Betty June Hayes to represent the Register of Deeds, and the Secretary of Administration for Governor Hunt, Jane Patterson. And what they saw, they liked. And they, yes.
I do apologize. I have an email from Rachel Patterson. It's a critical email. She's saying that we need to log out of Zoom as soon as possible. I do apologize.
And Roscoe, this is Kayla. Jacob, could you have her forward that over to the events team? We have not received that from Rachel, so I just want to make sure. Okay.
The events, okay.
Yeah, so Roscoe, if you want to continue, we'll work on this behind the scenes.
I'm sorry, what was this? I'm not displaying?
Nope, you can go right ahead. I'll work with Jacob behind the scenes.
Okay. And North Carolina then applied for one of the national demonstration projects to show how you could move from old records to new records. And that was pretty brave for a state that was based on the old English system of title. But North Carolina did, and Orange County and Chowan County and Cherokee County were chosen by competitive design. That's how I got involved, to get involved in the demonstration of taking property maps and title records to make them more accurate and to make them accessible. So we did that, participated in it, and went on with our project of completing the data side of modernizing title records. In fact, we finished that long before we got through assigning parcel identifier numbers to our maps. The state got through general statute legislation establishing this project of property maps through a Department of Land Records and the adoption of the parcel identifier number as the official identity of real property. And if you wanted to take advantage of this program, which offered money support, then you had to adhere to the standards of the program. This brought in, of course, Don Holloway and Connie Wester from the DOT to lead this program in the Department of Administration and to formulate a committee of participants, of stakeholders, and to adopt the standards that would be required of counties to participate and get help from the state. we went ahead and completed the side of the data. And here I am teaching a lawyer how to use our data system. She's not very confident in what I'm telling her. And we did the thing that most counties who decided to improve their maps did. We got another vendor. Now the vendors descended upon North Carolina to sell the counties on getting property maps, and they would whisk you off to their sites to show you how they made your maps and how they would make your maps become digital maps, which of course was the foundation of the GIS maps. And here we show our crew from Orange going off to visit Pennsylvania and the L. Robert Kimball plant, and where we learned about base maps and orthophotos and the importance of NAD and the importance of relating real property to their actual location on the ground. So we contracted hundreds of thousands of dollars and a process that took 2 years to complete to digitize all the parcels. That meant we had to begin in property mapping by working with the product as it arrived and using it to also compare with changes taking place and with what we already had in our database. And so we evolved as maps delivered to the ESRI software and the maintenance of our maps as digital GIS property maps. That meant digitizers. That meant, have you ever seen the old Unix workstations? That one behind Amy Gilbert there was about $190,000. So that when it's done now by PCs for, I'm exaggerating, but literally just a couple of $100. And all these issues that came up in our very first organizational meetings involving our stakeholders was the trail that leads to today. What are you doing? What are your standards? And what are you claiming for your maps? What are you claiming for the data behind the maps? And of course, with high eyebrows at that time were the attorneys, the title attorneys, and of course, the surveyors. We had both on the state committee and on the Orange County committee, a surveyor and an attorney. And those questions of what you thought you were going to represent with your product, were you going to claim a title authority? Were you going to do surveying work? And it wasn't mistakable of those high eyebrows that there was concern on their part. So even at that time and long afterwards, we got into discussions about what we were going to tell our citizens, what we were going to tell about our users as to what they were seeing and what product we would give them. And I bring that up and I wanted to tell you about this because it encouraged the cooperation between counties and the state, the counties with each other. And the Institute of Government's Bill Campbell said, why don't you form an organization to get you together? And graciously, the Institute of Government, which isn't what it's called now, but the Institute of Government hosted these first meetings of interest. And what that did, not only did it involve the discussion about what citizens or professionals or our own staff were going to represent and do, but it allowed the counties who had nothing to come and hear about it. And that's what stirred a lot of interest in those counties to learn about the program, to learn about what was being done in mapping, and to hear about how they might sell mapping to their county commissioners. Once again, remember those hundreds of thousands of dollars? Mapping your county is a lot of work. And the hiring of professionals to do it is a lot of work and a lot of money. So the support for doing property mapping in counties, perhaps your county, was a political movement of support. Support by telling your commissioners or your stakeholders to tell the commissioners that you are going to provide a great product to not just a tax office, but perhaps to all offices in the county, from EMS to planning to environmental health, that there was a product coming they could use, and that it would be of such quality that it would give them lots of opportunities to develop their standards, whether it was public health or whether it was the quality of assessment of property. But in doing that, you know, you're actually trying to sell the standards that you would use to both those who are your colleagues in offices in county government and to your public. So on the one hand, you had all the problems of your maps. In fact, counties that started from nothing ended up in better strategic sense than those of us who had those old maps and converted them, because the conversion instantly created quality and accuracy issues. And the development meant that you had to educate and train your staff. ESRI classes were very expensive then. And you had to take on expertise that a lot of counties either didn't have or couldn't afford in order to do the things that you were promising your mapping could do. In Orange, we did that. Everybody on this picture, and not including the handsome lad in the middle back, were existing mappers who had to be trained how to do digitizing and had to use Unix workstations to update GIS maps. That brought on that handsome lad, Chris Dwinell, who became our application developer, because all that neat stuff you saw yesterday in Jay's presentation for ESRI was not available at that time. There was a toolbox of, seems like endless thousands of little things that you had to put together just to do a property map or to maintain a property map. So the development of objects and the development of applications was certainly a heaven-sent addition. But anyway, in this training of staff and so on, those are people who not only were going to do the work and determine the good quality of the product, but they were also your ambassadors to the public. They were the ones who were going to meet with surveyors, to meet with citizens, and to provide products for them and to explain what those products meant. Well, I must say that certainly was the origin of the disclaimer. I'm sure you have disclaimers, and that came in very early. A statement of what you were representing and what you were not representing in a map product. Very different from the time in which you just reproduced a map because a citizen he wanted to look at it. When they looked at it and determined that their neighbor was encroaching on their property because it was on your map, the encroachment, and then they started calling their lawyers, who then called you to make sure that the standards of accuracy and the claims you were making were within the limits of a product not produced at surveying standards and not produced as a result of a title search by your staff. So the issues of, do you merge? Do you combine? Do you do it because somebody asks a tax clerk that they only want one bill, not 8 bills? Please put my property together, which is what used to combine property before you came along and before all of us came along. That was a process that you had to go through to fully understand how you would develop your product and make it available. And it's the same thing with data, not just how accurate your property lines are and why you gave a sliver of property from one to another based on a deed or a plat. There also was the public access by you or through you on top of your cadastral that somehow portrayed a resource conservation line that said they could or couldn't build a porch. These things that began to be provided in data from other offices and what they began to say, I'm sorry, we're going to take your address away from you and give you a geocoded address. And then you've got 25 subdivision lots screaming at your commissioners that they don't understand one thing in hell about their address that they now have, and they want their old address back. That happened in Orange, by the way. In fact, it happened on a street where one of our commissioners lived, and she was one of the people who was complaining to her colleagues. So how you represent the development of property, the standards that we'd use for assigning addresses, and of course, the products that would represent the authority of records, recorded records. I don't know, but few, if any, went the leap that Orange County did. That is, we had passed a local ordinance based on the general statutes that required every document that dealt with parcels or land had to be presented to the Land Records GIS office for a assignment of a parcel identifier number before it could be recorded in the Register of Deeds office.
Roscoe, you
In
have
that fashion, we became the foundation of standards because it had to go through us first before it could become a title record.
Roscoe, you've got 5 minutes left of your session. If you want to take questions, anybody can write their question.
I would be happy. This is to take any questions that you have.
If you type them in the chat box, I will relay the messages to Roscoe. Please stay on for a little bit longer. We do have a poll. Kayla, I guess you can go ahead and put the poll up while people type in their questions.
Oh, can I say yes?
I'm not getting a whole lot of questions, but I do have Betty Stevens, who's saying that she had the honor of knowing and working with Norman Long. Jeff Boone says that Yancey County still has some of these in the tax office, believe it or not. I believe that's when they were talking about, you were talking about addressing. Alice Wilson says, great to see Roscoe. It's been a long time. Love the old photos. I remember them all, good times. And Pam Carver says, we love you, Roscoe. Amanda Patton wants to know, do you use parcel fabric?
Of course, I have. I'm not in the office now. And so if Michael Burton is in this by any miracle, who is the head of that mapping now, I would be happy to have him answer that.
Michael Burton says, give Mary Stewart our love, miss you, Emperor.
Hey, I've got my Emperor shirt that was given me, GIS Emperor. And my Carolina pants are on.
Please repeat question. Do you use parcel fabric? How do you decide whether to show platted property lines to road center lines versus depicting the property line at the edge of the row where the platted line follows the center line?
This was, again, a technical issue early because, well, the original mappers, of course, never did anything other than the side of the road. They make the map look great. But we very early established layers for that, for the parcels that went to the middle of the road or across the road, and had a lot of technical problems trying to display that when a person wanted to see it. So yes, we did it. We mapped across to the center lines. We mapped across the roads to the opposite road line. But we had a lot of problems displaying that until the more modern forms of art came along and allowed that to, if not to be displayed, at least to be noted on the, whether it was a copy for the owner or for notification, to say to plan. You know, planning would say, I can't give you a permit because your parcel's not big enough for this zoning that you want. And yet the property did go and give them that amount of size that the planning department said they didn't have. So we had to make sure our stakeholders, if they were going to use regulatory processes for our product, that they understood an issue like that, and to determine not only whether it went to the middle of the road, but whether DOT took it or didn't take it.
That is fantastic. Thank you, Roscoe. Thank you, everybody, for showing up for this session. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference, the virtual conference. The next sessions should be starting pretty soon. All right.
Thank you so much, everybody. I love you all.